Hello everybody! Wow, I can't believe it's another live stream. Digger said to me on Thursday, are you having a live stream? I was like, has it come round again? Yes it has, and I say it every time. But this time I actually have modelling and painting and loads of stuff to show you. So it's going to be action packed. I had 11 hours of footage, which I've sped up to 1.5 hours. So that's all coming in a minute. But first we're going to have a quick look at sort of my Kickstarter that's come. Well, it's all about my Kickstarter because that's what I've been modelling, but talk a little bit about that that's coming out sometime this week, hopefully Wednesday, just as long as I have everything ready. And I will be honest, on the last one I was ready a week early. On this one I've got a draft pitch video which hasn't had the sort of colour grading and volume or audio or anything done to it yet, and I haven't got any stretch goals done really. I've got the first one done and that's it. And last time I had all my stretch goals done up to about 7k before I started and everything. So I think it's a different place this time, but I don't want it to go back a week. It will just keep dragging. I wanted to end in May anyway. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Let's see what we have here. So we've got, oh, hi Dillington. It's always good to have, he does great videos with his grandson. Hi Jaw21. Cup of tea on the ready. This is a depressing, cold, rainy day. It does feel like October. I've got my tea. It's mint tea. I've got spearmint running mad through one of my beds and it makes the most gorgeous tea. So every afternoon it's spearmint tea at the moment. Fresh spearmint tea. Norm says, next time I have 5 weeks in between, a little more breathing room. Yes. And I'm hoping that once this Kickstarter's gone and I've done the stretch goals, I'm actually going to take some time off from designing, which I love. But it means I'm not getting any real modelling done, and I've got a number of projects I need to get off the back burner. One being my Titanfall helmet that's been going for years. The others, the B1 battle droid, pit droid and folded up pit droid that are currently living on the spare bed in pieces. I've even had a cloth thrown over them and that room's been decorated and then the cloth taken off. I actually could do with getting them assembled, and then when they're ready I can pull them apart and sand them, but at least get them all the supports off and assembled to check I've got everything printed the right way round. I haven't got 2 lefts or 2 rights, and so when my friends come to visit they can actually stay in my bed. So there we go. Who else has arrived? Lee, been battling with mint in my greenhouse. Oh, mint goes mad. And there's a big patch of gravel after this, so it should be easy to keep down. It will just go behind other bushes. But I had 4 mints in the bed and only 2 of them have gone ballistic. They're both spearmint and the rest haven't. Hi Tom, great to have you here. So I'm going to play you 3 videos. You get 3 videos this evening. It's really, really over the top. And I'm still undecided on my pitch video. I really hate marketing. It's one of those things. I love designing stuff. I love modelling stuff. I feel like selling myself isn't really, it's a bit prideful and over the top, and I'd rather just go, well, I just modelled this. It's like someone asked me once. He was a typical Cockney barrow boy and went around and sold himself everywhere to businesses to do stuff for them. And he said to me, would I have heard of you? And he wasn't into modelling, and I said, well, if you're not into modelling, probably not. And one of the guys I was with turned around to me and, Kathy, you've been on TV. It's like, oh yeah, I forget that. So anyway, there we go. So hi to Lindsay's Builds, great to have you with us. And Norm says 3 for the price of 1, that's a deal. And it's free too, that's even cheaper. Polite, I have to turn the volume up. The rain is pelting against the window and a thunderstorm is approaching. Oh, no, that sounds awful. You're in Germany, aren't you? That's, yeah, it'll be coming to us soon, I'm sure. So, I haven't missed anyone saying hello, have I? No. Right, I'm going to play you the first of the videos and I need your help because the first one's my draft pitch video. And I, as I just said, hate marketing. I'm not entirely sure whether I like this or not. So let's just tell me what you think.
This is Galactic
Is
Races
a sound from me
featuring terrain, racers and miniatures, all so you can bring racing to your tabletop. You can print the miniatures and racers in resin, it's pre-supported professionally, or you can print the races and terrain in FDM support free.
So which racer will you back? Will you pick rank amateur Bob Jetster? Or how about newcomer Attica, yet to finish a race? Or perhaps Crossonic in pole position is more your guy? Finally, Bully Bullhorn, everyone's favourite. Will he win this time too? The mini set doesn't just include the seated pilots, it also includes the flag wavers and a pit crew. Plus standing poses for all of the races. The terrain set has a pit stop to go with your pit crew, a modular stand you can fill with your minis, hopefully more are painted than mine. There's a start line and start buildings, plus a range of rocks for you to do some terrain along the way.
There's also a basic game. This will expand as updates go on, stretch goals will be reached, and will include the basic rules to get you going with a few STLs for game assets.
There are 3 different core sets: races, minis and terrain. If you go all in, you also get the racing game. You can also get a collector's edition of all of our Kickstarters to date and a merchant's license if you want to sell physical prints. The races come with sandy bases and plain bases as standard. A very early stretch goal will get the rocky bases. It's the same for the minis. Whether you choose to print resin, the left-hand races are all resin, or FDM, like the right-hand races, you're guaranteed a great result.
So back now to bring Galactic races to your tabletop.
So there we go. What do you think, guys? Good, bad, indifferent? So welcome to Ranging Mando, or Mandy as people seem to like to call him. I thought it was interesting because Norm said his autocorrect kept changing Mando to Mandy, but mine knows better and mine leaves it at Mando, probably because I type it more often. Thanks Norm, who thinks it's great, and 796, welcome, and thank you, you think it's great too. Jaw21, accessories sold separately, batteries not included. Yeah, I had to fill out the stands and I could only fill about 3/4 of half of one. So yeah, and Christoph, if you want to change any wording on the games, I can re-record that. What I want to know is, it's actually a very short pitch video. Is it too short? Should I sell more? I have another video I'm going to show you that's a race that I did, and I wasn't sure whether to include that in it. But once we've got this little bit of, you know, you helping me with my marketing, because you're kind of like guys who might buy it, some of you, would it pay to put the race into the pitch video is what I'm wondering. But the terrain that you saw there, everything there is what's going to be going. Have I frozen? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. Was I frozen then? Did you hear me? Oh well, we'll keep going. Okay, so Lindsay Bill says I'm frozen. Could you hear me when I was frozen? Because apparently I'm now chilled again. Excellent. I've got to love, OBS has been really flaky. In fact, my computer's been flaky all afternoon. No idea basically what it's been on, but there's a 20-second lag. So between me speaking and, you know, seeing anything on chat takes 20 seconds or so. So it's always great to recover. So once I've done this, I'm just going to show you. Oh, so Christoph's fine with the game. That's good. Christoph's designing it for me, and it's been sort of a bit of a collaboration. I need to produce some items for him to play with, so I've got to do a ramp, and I think barricades or gates of some description are also on the list. I've got some marker rocks to do with flags. One of the problems I've found is that the flags I've done look beautiful, but they tip the droids over backwards quite a lot, so you have to weight your sort of FDM or resin bottoms quite a lot to get them to stand upright. And I've got magnets in them, but I didn't have any metal out of them to stick to, so yeah, that'd be fine. Right, so this is the race that I did. Welcome Galactic Racers, and we have a great race for you today. The contestants are making their way to the start line. Who are you waiting for? Bully Bullhorn? Perhaps Attica, the rank outsider? course Sonic in pole position, or perhaps Bob Jester yet to finish a race. The flag wavers are clearing the track, and they're off. We have an early lead from Bully Bullhorn, but the others are fast behind. Oh, Attica's catching him up. Will this pit stop by Bob Jester losing the race? No! Attica crosses the finish line first and the crowd go wild. Woohoo! Let's see if I'm frozen. No, I'm not frozen this time. So that's it. Yeah, that was a little bit of fun I did this afternoon. I don't know whether to put it in at the end of the pitch video or whether to leave it separate. Let me know what you think on that one. It was quite funny. If you saw it on one of my reels or something on social media, basically I had like this. It was for a camera. It's like a little wheelie thing with 4 wheels and it's hand operated. And I literally just shoved it into a little pile of rocks at the end. So I had all these models I'd spent weeks, months designing and weeks making, you know, just precariously on this little dolly on a box to get it the right height with all my really useful boxes that were holding all the buildings up. And then I just shoved it sideways, which was quite funny. So Norm says, use the static race footage in the Kickstarter. So what do you mean by that, Norm? So you think I should put that race into the pitch video, basically? So just keep it all together as one big thing and then just shove it in the end of it, effectively, and then do the support now after that, which is what I was thinking of doing. But I basically ran out of time this afternoon. What's a static camera? Use static race footage in the static camera. I'm not following you, Norm. It's been a long day. I haven't had my latest cup of tea. Anyway, another thing is I never normally put myself on anything except a live stream. I never ever do my face on social media and stuff. And it used to be I used to get rude comments and all sorts of weird stuff sent me, and you know, it was just a way of avoiding that. So it's interesting. I actually put myself on, and I washed my hair today. So I thought, oh, you know, I've washed my hair. Important. I may as well go on camera today. So that's cool. So that is basically coming out Wednesday this week. You're supposed to put them out on a Tuesday or Wednesday for best audience engagement. And so far it's got the most pre-sign-ups. I think it's over 200 now. And I've never got more than about 170 before. So it's got the most pre-sign-ups. I'm really excited about it. The camera was moving in the beginning footage. The race was a non-moving camera. Well, that's because it's like I wanted them all to look like they were flying through the same bit. So I kept them set up. I've actually got 2 cameras. If it's moving, it will have been done on my little DJI, which is this thing. It's plugged in, which is this, which has a gimbal. And it doesn't always focus right, and it isn't always the best footage, but there we go. So people like the race footage. So I might put the race footage at the beginning, a little bit of it, just them zooming past or something, and then have the full race footage at the end. Because I spend a bit of time filming it and doing it. I actually wish I had just zoomed them against a green scene, and then I could have put whatever I liked in the background of all of them and had them sort of stacked a bit more. But I didn't, so yeah, it'll be fun. And the green scene just hangs in midair. But I think it's important that you have a good pitch video, but they don't get a huge number of views. But it's an important, fun thing to do. And it will go on YouTube, which is another thing. So there we go. Right. People like the race footage. Thank you. Thank you very much. Lee says, any tips for dealing with TV filming? I've just been asked to do an interview for ITV. I don't know. I've never really prepared for it or done anything. I just talk. I mean, I do a live stream for 2 hours. I'm used to talking. I just talk a lot. I used to talk a lot of work. In fact, I don't really get to talk to anyone anymore. I talk to people in the park randomly as I walk around, you know, smile at everybody. It freaks some of them out because, you know, they're trying to be grumpy. Sometimes I just want to, you know, not talk to people, but I still smile. I think it's my important part. Walk around every lunchtime and smile at people. But realistically, Lee, they know what they're doing. They know how to get you to be at ease. Try to stay relatively still and not and ah a lot, but don't overthink it. You know, they've asked you, you'll be brilliant. I wouldn't worry about it. Just not being worried about it is the main thing. The worst ones are the ones that they tell you to do something and they don't do it. So I've done reality TV where they tell you not to look at the camera, and some people would just look at the camera all the time, and so they couldn't use the footage. Other people, it's like, we want you to look at the camera, so you have to look at the camera. So it's whatever they tell you to do, just follow it. There we go. So I'm going to put on in the background the video of me working for once on modelling. I know this is a bit of a rarity for me nowadays, but here we go. This is going to get edited down to a YouTube video to come out maybe end of the week. I'd like to get some stretch goals done for the next few days. And of course, I'm always in the way wherever I put myself on this. Maybe if I put myself up here, I'll be less in the way. We'll see. It's also sped up. So actually, I used the slow-mo on my iPhone to get a really, really good amount of slow, spraying footage. So everything got slow-mo. So if this looks like it's in normal speed, it's because it's a sped up slow-mo. And then the next one will be the same shot, but on my other camera, the little DJI I showed you, and that will be fast because that's what it is. So when this actually comes out, I've got all these gorgeous slow looks. And then this is terrain. So it's all my terrain is FDM, apart from one or two pieces which I did in resin, which are the pit stop because it's got a lot of details. I was actually shocked. I did it in 0.1 FDM. It came out almost as good, except on the wall where you could see the layer lines. But on the actual detail of everything, it came out almost as good as the resin. It was really amazing. Really pleased with it. And if I thought I could go down further in height, I probably would, because it's only a small piece. So I sprayed these two to try this stone spray. I was like, I'm going to try stone spray. Oh, I did the first one with just spray putty, and the second one I did with this stone spray. Oh, it was awful. I mean, it looked like the sort of thing they spray on the walls in toilets, if you remember those. I don't think they do it anymore, but back in the day, they had the stuff they sprayed on toilets. And it went on like soggy toilet roll, using the toilet theme a bit more. And it went on and it went solid, and it didn't go solid, it went on mushy. If you touched it, it was like wet toilet roll, and then it sort of knocked itself off and you ended up with a lot of black spots where it wasn't even. It was really dire, really dire. And here it is in sped up. So this is what it looks like when you'd often see it. So what I decided was I'd buy another stone spray. My favourite one for this sort of thing is Desert Bisque by Rust-Oleum Textured. It's a really good spray, and aged iron is great for roads. But I didn't have any left, and I got this, so I thought this was that, but it wasn't. And I went to look at it, and it was a week's delivery, so I thought, well, it's all going to be finished by then. Basically sprayed it with this, bought the limestone, which was off Amazon instead of wherever the Desert Beast wasn't on there, and that came next day, so I actually sprayed a third building, which I printed overnight with that, to show you that in a minute. But this is all FDM, so I'm spraying it with spray putty. Now, you can't get it in North America, you have to use filler primer, but spray putty basically shrinks into the gaps and hides them a little. And this has got a lot of rock detail, so the lines aren't particularly obvious, but it is still great to have something like this as your first coat, just to try and get rid of as many layer lines, because I am going to add a wash, and I am going to then use I'm not dry brushing, but I'm using pigment put on with a brush. And if I don't have the layer lines partly masked, they really will stand out, especially on taller pieces. Stating the obvious, trendy splatter paint in public loos to stop graffiti. It didn't work. No, because, I put 2 coats on and it still looked rubbish, this one. So it did look the kind of colour they use in a public loo. Now these are my pit stops, and I've got one in 0.1 FDM and one in resin, and I supported it for resin. And one of the things I found with this was I supported my minis, my race. I tried one racer, it was awful. It's partly the resin. The resin's clear and it does clump if you have a lot of supports close together. So I often get clumped feet on minis, but it distorts. And I've got quite a bit of it, and I keep buying clear because I like to see what's in the bottom of the vat. It's just laziness. But actually someone recommended Nylon Black by Siriatech, but it's been out of stock, which is the same resin blue, but I think because it's black it won't get the clumping round supports, which is I think a factor of the resin not draining away enough, and because it's clear the light will spread a lot further. So one of the things that I kind of need to improve is my supports, but thankfully I know somebody who does the supports for Patreon Darkfire, and he does a really good job. I've never had a bad set of supports from them, and he's been supporting all my minis for me. So I'm saying professionally supported minis. He does them obviously for them and does really well. So I took this long thought of, should I spend the time to learn to do the minis properly when I'm not that good at them and I've got a lot going on? Or should I just get somebody else who's good at them to do them? And in this instance, I actually went with, I'm going to get somebody else who's good at them. You know, Craig's excellent at them to do them. So since I printed everything, I've actually had everything re-supported by somebody else. So the ones that are going out on the Kickstarter and will be in print testing when he gets them back to me are actually going to be supported by somebody else, which you will all think is a good thing, I suspect. Norm, my dustbin lids are looking awesome. He does the same thing. Yeah, my brown one now looks brown again. Sadly, so does my green one. I have to look at the side of them to work out which one's brown and which one's green. And also, it was just beginning to flake off because obviously it's quite a shiny plastic, so the paint doesn't really stick to it. And so now I've got areas where it's flaked off and I'm painting back again on the plastic. So there we go. You joined the dots, says Digger, to make graffiti, stating the obvious. Right, Tom, welcome. Don't worry. I think it's quite a quiet night at the moment. I can see there's only 30 viewers. I think we had about 60 or something this time last video. And I felt like all I really did was waffle there. So, you know, there we go. Stating at Digger, model railway. Do you know, I tried an at earlier and it didn't bring up the names like it used to do. Have they changed that? Because it just didn't bring it up. Anyway, got to pass the time for a few minutes. Yeah. So I did the spray putty. Now I'm using Antico by Cobra. Cobra I buy on Amazon. It's a spray paint. I find it's really thick and covers well. It's great on FDM prints for that reason. Probably wouldn't use it on resin necessarily. But I really like it, and I've got a lot of colours in it. Now, I used a lot of those colours and they didn't work, and I ended up using some Montana paints as well. And I find Cobra sprays a lot better than Montana. I think there's one Montana which I have, which is chocolate white, or white chocolate. It's a shock white, blanc. And it just doesn't spray that well, and it never has. And every time it puts me off Montana. Though actually the Sahara Beige that I use in a minute worked really well. But I think Montana needs to be shaken for about twice as long as Cobra to get a good finish. But I have loads of Montana Sahara Beige because it's apparently the colour they used on B1 droids. I mentioned them earlier. I may have one in my spare room. But that's apparently the colour they actually used on them when they were painting them for the movies. So that's why I have a lot of it. And it's actually a really good colour as the last coat on this set. Lee, do you have a specific brand of spray paint? Right, Cobra and Montana are the two that I've used for this. This is Cobra here, and this is the fast version. You just have the slow version. And I also use Halford's car paints, but generally I'm using their black matte, their white, their red and their yellow filler primer. So the whites and reds are primer, the black is just matte back paint, and then the yellow is filler primer. And I really like that yellow. I used it on the cargo for Savannah Spaceport. It's a sort of sludgy yellow. It's a great colour and it's going to be used a lot more in future. And then my favourite paints actually, and I use Tamiya Fine Grey. I love Tamiya Fine Grey. I love the colour of it. It's got a slight sheen to it. It's a lot finer than the Halford's car paint. It gives a beautiful finish. You can use it on minis and everything. It's just a great spray out the can. The cans are smaller and more expensive. Well, perhaps not more expensive given the price Halford's is now. But they spray beautifully. They have white. I don't think the white sprays as well as the grey for Tamiya. But I think that's the case with every spray paint I've ever used. I have Motip White that I'm going to use in a minute on this, which I used for a previous project and I bought for it because I love Motip spray putty. The white was very thin though, and that's why I used it here actually. I wanted a translucent white coat. It doesn't cover. And I've also used I used Halfa Black in this for the minis for basing them to do a zenithal, and I used White Army Painter. So I'll mention all those as we go so you can see where I'm using them. But at the moment we're still on Antico. Does light sanding of the plastic help with the painting? Art Diraj asks, I never sand anything, but I'm painting resin here and FDM plastic, and I find because I'm using lacquer-based paints effectively, or if they're acrylics, they're for spray graffiti painting, I find they stick fine. I've never had a problem with them coming off. If I was not using spray paints, if I was starting with something like artist acrylics, yeah, I would be priming them, and maybe sanding would help. But these have got detail on them, so if I sand them, I'm just going to lose the detail. You can't sand FDM prints well, and the resin ones aren't plastic anyway. And I don't want it to stick to my bins, so I definitely haven't sanded those. Norm, it's summertime, Kathy. People vacationing. Really? People are allowed off? Actually, see, this is a week in the UK where it's kind of between holidays. So the kids aren't off this week, and it's before the main holiday. So grown-up people might be away at the moment, but families aren't. So this is another Cobra, and I think it's called Sand. I think it's just called Sand. Yeah, I didn't like it. So it's not the final colour of these at all. Some of the colours I used were just a bit too yellowy. They were weird. I ended up with a really interesting 4-5 coats in the end to get what I wanted. So, John, Bracken's arrived. How confused did bin men get? Well, thankfully, John, we only ever put black and a big one out. So I never put the brown and green out together, so they can't get too confused, because they can tell the black from the green or the brown because they're different sizes. So this is going over everything with fast speed. Was that a brown a full can, and how much was left afterwards, if any? So Jaw21 asked that. It wasn't a full can. This is the sand, definitely. It's a much darker brown. I decided I didn't really like it, but it was there then on. It was a bit too dark. But again, these are just Cobra ones that I had sat on the side. I've ordered a few more in different colours just to see. One of my problems is I often only have one can of something. So I end up with everything being different colours, more because the paint's going to run out. I think I had 3 cans of Antico, or 2.5 cans of Antico, and I've got 1.5 cans left. So I probably used a whole full can, but I did use it on almost all the terrain. And I'm not sure, because it was 2 halves, whether they were full halves or empty halves. But generally, I would only do 1 or 2 coats of a colour. In this instance, I wanted a bit of variety. And I wanted a bit of different colours. So I've tried to do light dust coats on top, which you'll see me doing in a minute. Now, one of the problems with that is you can see the wind in the background, and this is sped up, but you can see that the leaves are moving a lot. And you try and spray paint and you go, and it just goes thump and misses. So when you're trying to do dust coats, you know, you end up not getting the model a lot. And that's happened on my Zenithal Prime. If you look, it's a really bad Zenithal Prime, because I did it outside and I sprayed it, and I've got 1/2 of some of the faces are just pure black still, because obviously I just didn't spray from the right angle, or I did and it just didn't land. So not ideal. And when I say Zenithal Prime, so for the racers and the miniatures, I was really trying to speed through. So I was going to use speed paints. Now, speed paints, you can put over white, it's great. But if you spray them black first and spray the white from above, you get automatic shadows. And one of my pet hates of speed paints is where they pool, and the idea is that they're not on the high bits and they pool in the low bits, and they're quite translucent paint, so the colour underneath shows through. But where they pool, it becomes more saturated because it's got more of the paint, which is quite a saturated paint, and I normally dilute mine. And because it's quite saturated, you can end up with oversaturated shadows. Whereas if you look at it in reality, shadows are not more saturated. They're the same saturation level as the sort of other things normally. So anyway, I prefer them to maybe have a bit of black in them. And normally I'd fix it by going over with a wash. But actually, because I had all the spray cans out, a Zenithal Prime was a great way to quickly do it, even if it wasn't ideal. Now, this one I actually sprayed, this is the Montana, and I shook it quite a lot. I know it needs a couple of whatevers, and I did shake it quite a bit before I put it on camera, and I carried on shaking it, and then it did this horrendous spatter everywhere. It was really, really bad. It wasn't great. So anyway, I sprayed it this shock white and then went over it with a few other colours patchily. So what I'm doing at the moment is just building up layers of spray paint. I try not to hand paint when I have huge volumes of terrain, just because it takes too much time. I haven't really hand painted anything in this that's terrain, apart from the little pit stops that have loads and loads of detail in them deliberately. But yeah, this is great. These are my stands, so you can put any minis that you want on. I put all my minis on and filled 3/4 of a stand, and they're modular. So if you wanted, you could just literally put the stand on 2 end pieces on, maybe a stairs and a 2 end pieces, and just have the stand. You can have them raised up with those arches underneath. You can have them, there's actually, these are 3 deep and 2 wide, in case I needed them for the photography, really, to sort of hide the backdrop a bit. And they're made to be modular, but that's it really. They're just open lock clip together. I do like open lock clips. I quite often use mini clips because I just find them easier for sizing. Big open lock clips are actually a big amount of chunk in them. But these stayed together quite well. I didn't actually attach the back, so I could be more modular with it without having to unclick it all the time. So when my minis are on, if I don't want it to take a lot of space, I can leave the back tier off. But if the minis are on and you're trying to pull open lock clicks in now, you'll jar them and they'll all fall over and probably break, you know, my luck. So there we go. So you can see the various days' weather. If you've been in the UK, you'll probably know we've had the wettest. It was 8 months, then I think it was 9 months. It's probably coming up with the wettest 10 months on record at the moment. And as a result, there's been whole days where I've wanted to spray paint and I just haven't been able to. And I was really blessed that the weeks I needed to spray paint, because I needed to get this painted, actually have been fairly dry. I mean, it's rained at times I didn't need to spray paint. Before now, I've been outside spray painting and I've left them out to dry and harden and sort of outgas, so the smell stays outside the house rather than in. And I've come out and discovered they're covered in rain, which isn't a problem with lacquer paints like these, but is a problem when you want to spray the next coat because you need to get all the water off and dry them out. There we go. So I keep spraying this with lighter colours. It's got some Montana shock white over them to just lighten them up. They're actually quite light. The buildings are actually more light than I've painted them, but they kind of fit in the sandy theme. It's really quiet in chat today. If anyone's got any questions as I go, please do chip in and ask me questions, because you know, I'm always happy to answer them. So Stacey's done a comment for the algorithm. Oh, and I need to remind you to like as well, don't I, for some reason. Now, one of the things I do need to do, I feel like I've been quite chilled. I've stopped working in the evening at the moment, so I've been doing my guilty sort of thing about reading loads of fan fiction for Star Wars instead of actually working of an evening. But I'm trying to get my work-life balance back. But I just saw a comment, were you just talking at the paint can? No, I could have been Norm. I sometimes tell them off for not spray painting very well. I could actually have been talking for the camera as well, but I never use that, so I don't know why I bother. But yeah, I definitely try not to talk. And I noticed that I kind of do talk a lot and I nibble and I just say things, and it's just like, oh, that's why I try not to include myself, especially sped up, because you can see here I'm muttering to myself as I do things. So yeah, I'm probably talking to the spray can or the racer, or telling it off for doing something, or telling the fly off that landed on it. Like, fly, what are you doing? So, and they're normally dead as well at that point. So yeah, if you see me talking, probably a lip reader will tell me what I could be saying. It'd be quite embarrassing to find out. It's probably chuntering about nothing. And then I just, as well, which is really annoying when I'm fast, and it really bugs me. So you don't often see me if I possibly can. I even know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm doing it, but there we go. I notice it when I video myself. And I hate watching myself on video, which is one reason you rarely see me on there. Lee says, everyone's out enjoying the lovely weather, haha. Oh yeah. If you're in the UK, then yeah. So John says, it was raining here when I was walking back and cold enough to need a jacket. I came round from Mum's, where I popped over to see Trish and go for tea. And it was 7:45 and it was raining then. So yeah, but it was just starting to rain. So I don't know if it's setting or just it was a slight patch. But it's the UK. We have green and pleasant land. And at the moment it's green and pleasant because it rains every single day, it seems like. In fact, it's more common now when you say, oh, it's not raining, than when you say it is raining. And yet in my last job that I actually officially worked at, I remember I was Worcester and I used to walk around the county park, country park, every single lunchtime. And I only missed about 1 or 2 for rain in almost the entire winter one year. And yet now I seem to miss quite a few with rain, though I do generally go out a bit and I often see John and Bracken, hence Bracken in brackets, in the park. So not that I saw you today, John, but there we go. This is, to me, a fine grey. If you want a grey, this or Halford's grey primer are definitely the best 2 that I know. I just really like them both. Lee says Worcester is a lovely city. Well, I came from where I live, which is Solihull, and I came down the motorway, and it took somewhere between half an hour to an hour, depending on what the roadworks were. And then I would drive to the county council, where I wasn't working at the county council, but I was working at a central government body, DEFRA, that had offices there. I never actually really went into Worcester. I think I went in about once for a Christmas do, twice for Christmas do, and that's it. So I never got to see the city. I've only really been there by canal boat or train. So yeah, occasionally. Tom says, hi, isn't there a lot of paint just blowing away when it is that windy? Yes, there is a lot of paint just blowing away when it's that windy, and sometimes it helps if you just spray up into the wind, so with the wind, so that it blows it onto the model rather than off. There is, but I needed to get it painted. So, and also a lot of paint would miss anyway, but I would be an inch or 2 further away, probably painting if I could avoid it, but I can't. Now we're on to here. This is Sahara Beige by Montana, and this is a great colour, and if I was just going to do one colour, this is probably the colour I would pick, because it's actually a really, really good colour. The quickest one that I did, we haven't got to yet, and that was when I used one of the stone paints that I bought, and I literally just left that as the stone paint because it was excellent, and it was one coat. I didn't even fill a primer it. So we'll talk about that one in a minute. Oh, that's me trying to work out if it is about to rain. So Tom says, wouldn't a well-ventilated room be better in a breathing mask? I sprayed my last Kickstarter inside because it was raining outside continually. And no, is the short answer. Definitely not. A, the whole house stinks, even with a well-ventilated room. B, the amount of volume of particulate that these put out means that I have dust inches thick in that room. Just all that spray paint you're saying's not hitting the models, that ends up in your room as dust, or it ends up on your filters. And also, I need to change my filters, and I was being too lazy. I couldn't be bothered to go out and change my filters, and I need to resort the ventilation a bit and do a few upgrades on it. And I had to do that before I did this, and I just wanted to get it painted at this point. I just wanted it done. So I know I can take it outside. I'm going to use spray cans, because doing it with an airbrush, fitting some of these in with my Saverna Spaceport, I did that in there, and just fitting them in was a nightmare. I was only generally doing one coat for them, and this has had 3 or 4 coats. Just the amount of paint that ends up everywhere you don't want it. As dry particulate matter, it's just everywhere. So no, that's why I don't do it inside, because of just that amount of particulates. Mark says, I thought you'd retired from doing this. Hi, Tom. Tom Grimsley says hello. I thought you'd retired. No. I haven't retired. And what I do now is I design 3D prints for a living. So that's what I do. But hi, Mark. Lee says, I really like the idea of doing a canal boat holiday, but I'm off put by the toilet situation. We lived on well, my parents had a canal boat from me being the age of 3 to me being in my early 20s, by which point I wasn't going with them. And this is a dust coat, so it's not a full coat, so that the Antico underneath will show through when I get some mottling. So this is not a heavy coat, it's a light coat, and I'm trying to do it from further away. Thankfully, this wasn't such a windy day, and if it is gusting, I did stop. But it gives it a nice dark light sort of pattern within it. It gives it more depth to the colour on the rocks. So toilets are just, I mean, they're that blue liquid stuff and they get pumped out. But if you're on a hire boat, they'll pump it before you go in and they'll pump it when you bring it back. You shouldn't need to pump it out for a week, I wouldn't have thought. But we had our own canal boat and I used to spend 4 weeks in the summer with it. And you know, when I was young, it was great. I read 2 or 3 books a day sometimes when it was raining and there were no locks for us to go out and stand in the pouring rain while doing. And sometimes it was sunny. But I do have a lot of memories of horizontal rain. But it was 4 weeks. And if I was excited, and my dad sometimes, because there were no locks, would go off before we were up, I would lie, because my bunk was next to the engine, I'd lie there and pretend I was in a spaceship going to Mars. Yeah, I wanted to be an astronaut. But yeah. So this is a light dust coat. You can see that the white's still showing through. And again here, in slow-mo, light dust coats. This is going on the pit stop diorama. It's not quite in focus, this, is it? I'm in focus, but nothing else seems to be. John says, doing very random times in the park because I'm painting my flat in the mornings. Yeah, I thought I'd missed you a few times this week. Your neighbours will get their things painted too. Yeah, the dog barks incessantly at me when I'm out there, so I don't think it's too pleased. I mean, he barks whether I'm painting or not. And I'm not very often in the garden, so he's not that used to me. He's a little one, and he's a cute dog, don't get me wrong, and he's not loud or anything, but bless him, I don't think he's too happy. Now this is not always, I don't always get this coat right, because I don't always get it even enough. And I should probably mop it up a bit more than I do. I ended up with a lot of brown, sort of sitting where I didn't want it, but this is a brown acrylic wash. I did do a video on washes, magic in a bottle once, and the recipe for this brown is in there. So it's brown, transparent, translucent brown ink, matte medium and water basically. And you spray it through a spray bottle. Don't forget to rinse through with clean water after you've sprayed so it doesn't gunk up. And it's great, you know, it's an acrylic wash, so it dries quite well. But what happens sometimes, and it happened on the viewing platform, is I put quite a bit on and it ran to the edge and then just dried with a dark brown rim. And 1 or 2 places, like on the mushroom rock, it just didn't run all the way to the bottom. So I ended up with it all drying in a droplet. So I should have spent a little bit more care on probably making sure everything got cut. And you can just see it on the front of that building nearest that I've just moved, that it hadn't run all to the bottom, and I probably needed a more even coat. So it's all right, but it's not, you can't move it when it's dried. So once it's dried, it's dried. So I should have spent just an extra minute or 2 checking everything before I moved on to the next one. But it's a really quick, easy coat to do, and it dries quickly. Unlike oils, everything will go over the top of it in a little while later. So it's quite cool. And it was my last coat outdoors. I did all 3 of these in one day, I think, or over a couple of days perhaps with a night in between. But once they're dry, you can more or less spray the next coat with this and then just leave them all to set up, which is what I was doing. Norm says, an inexpensive camping tent, one tall enough to stand up in with a vent to allow air to circulate might be the answer. It could be. Realistically, I would... Big terrain is a pain. I could have painted some of them in smaller pieces to fit into the, like the viewing platform's in 2 or 3 pieces, is in 3 pieces. So I could have, actually it's in 4 pieces. I could have put that in 3, 4 pieces, whatever, it's in pieces. I could have put that in if I'd taken it apart. You know, I could have spray painted this in pieces, but then you get the lines where you join them back up again. But you know, I just paint round the rain. It's not normally too bad, and if your wash gets rained on, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, I'd have to store the camping tent somewhere then. And most of the really cheap ones are too short. I'd probably be better with like a marquee like they use for car repair sort of stuff. So John, Lee getting in the internet to reliably connect is more of a problem than lose on the canals. Very true. And running out of electricity without running your battery can also be an issue. Mark, I lived on a narrowboat for 2 years. Pump out toilet stink. I didn't think they were that bad. If I'm honest, I didn't think they were that bad. I don't know. I guess I just spent so long on them from a young age that I was fine. This was another building where I really should have mopped up because I ended up with some quite brown drop marks sitting in places I didn't want them on this. And it looked fine when it went on, but as it ran down, I'd moved on to the next ones and it just pooled awkwardly. So I actually wasn't happy with how dark they were. So in a minute, you'll see me go over them with a white Motip white paint. And I picked the Motip white paint because it's practically translucent. So it's a really good glaze coat. And I was actually happy then how they came out because they appeared glazed with marks on. So it worked a lot better. There we go. Oh yeah, so John says minimum resolution is about as good as it gets without it buffering. You're on the boat now though, aren't you, John? Stating, trying to imagine Kathy's hair in a space helmet. Oh, I'd probably have it cut short. Yeah. So Nigel Saunders, the bonsai zone. Hi Kathy, have you had any problems with older 3D models warping? Yes, definitely. So what's interesting with this is I did the racers in FDM and they were designed for FDM. And then I printed them in resin and I got someone else to support them, but I actually supported these and printed them. And I used Tech Blue, which is what I've moved to for miniatures, because I was dropping miniatures and losing bits off the end of guns. And blue is really bendy and great. So what I found is my old resins would have shattered with, this is the white Motip going on as a translucent top coat, by the way. My old resin prints probably have shattered with the stress on the connectors that go between the engines and the sleds. But the problem I had with this was I tried putting the sled on them, and with that resin that I printed them in, and I've got another resin which is navy grey which I could have reprinted in, but I actually printed them in FDM, so the supports for my resin ones are in FDM, which is flexible but more rigid, and my supports were literally just going whoop, with any weight on them in the resin because it's a very bendy resin. So I think the answer is I always put 10% tenacious in, which adds bend to everything, because I'm trying to print things that are robust. So if you drop them, they don't automatically shatter, which of course probably would happen. So what I've noticed is my lat, which is a video that I've done on YouTube, you've seen maybe, it's a Clone Wars lat, and it's got wings that stick out like this, and the wings have drooped down on the edges. So at the moment, it's on walls, actually, on both sides. It's between the walls. This is Siege of Mandalore. Just it. This is limestone paint that I got. It's a textured limestone paint. I think it's Rust-Oleum. And I sprayed this, and it was brilliant. It was really good. I haven't even put the spray putty on, because I'm testing out stone spray. It went on. It created this lovely colour that's actually really good straight away, and just brilliant. So actually, if I was doing this terrain again, I would buy myself 2 or 3 coats of limestone because it puts a chalky finish on, and I would literally just spray with that, and then I could colour it with the brown wash, which is what I did. So I've got the brown wash over the top of this, and it's a great sort of effect, really. Comes out almost the same colour as the others, and they've got 2 or 3 coats of paint on, where I only had 1 coat. John says, yeah, he's watching in 144p and it's buffering at times. That's not good. Depends where you are. I mean, if you're moving on a canal boat, you really can't help where you end up, and it can be really, really bad if you're in a cutting or something. So this is just this brown wash going on. It was a great way of doing these desert buildings. So if you're doing Tatooine, limestone paint, or any desert adobe building, limestone paint, and then this a brown wash or something like that over top, perfect. You could apply the wash with a brush. It's just so much quicker when you're outside doing it with this spray. I'd also do it inside, but it would just get everywhere. And I have got white worktops now. And you can see it's sunny again. We had a couple of sunny days when I was doing this. If you're interested in the Kickstarter, I did, this is shameless plug now, but hey, it is my live stream. There is a pinned chat at the top that's the link to it if you want to go and sign up to, it should go live this week, so it'd be great if people sign up. It makes me feel that people want it. And you can see there, that's the final effect on them. So at this point, I wanted to add a little bit of lightness to them. I felt they were a bit dark. This is a beige tile grout. Now, you will all know about using pigments if you do modelling. Pigments are raved about, and they came out of military modelling, and I've had my pigments. It's the original MIG production pigments, which I'll pull one out in a minute. And I've still got them, and Industrial City Dirt is definitely my favourite colour, and it's what I use in a minute on this. But it's expensive, and you'll go through those titchy little pots on a building this size in a couple of minutes. Look at the size of that pot. You know, that is going to not go very far when you're trying to do all of these buildings. Whereas if you use tile grout, and this is just a beige tile grout, Larson's or something from Amazon probably, then you can get a really good effect. It sticks to these paints a little bit, but you can always, you can actually add water, you know, isopropyl alcohol to it and make a slurry or something if you want. And you can just literally use it like a pigment. I use tile grout as a pigment all the time, and it's because it is a colouring, it's cement and it's sand, and most of the UK ones aren't heavily sanded, so you know, they don't create a lot, and it's great just for adding on really quick dust coats on things, especially desert buildings. And you can see here I can also pile it around where I've got those runs on the brown's pooled a bit, and it's just a nice way to tone everything down. So some of these have got quite a few coats on, but the rock work has literally just got 2 coats of paint, and it's got a spray putty, then Antico, then Sahara beige, and then this. Now, to stick it down, I'm just using isopropyl alcohol and water. That's all I've used on these, and the isopropyl alcohol and water is, it's not sticking it properly. I need to varnish them. But the day of the photo shoot, where I needed to photo shoot that day for the videoing for this, effectively, it was raining, and I just thought it's been quite humid, so I'm probably going to spray sometime next week after the Kickstarter's live. And what you can see is it disappears here, and when you varnish, some of it will disappear. But when it dries, it will come back up. And what it does nicely, especially on the bases, is it kind of sits into the gaps. So that was the terrain. Now this is one of my earliest test prints. I think this is actually a 0.16, and now I've got them in both resin and FDM. So you'll see me alternating between resin and FDM. Now I always wet sand resin, so not to put particulate dust out of resin, which is quite nasty, out into the atmosphere. So you'll see I'm always wet sanding these, and I've just clipped them together. Some of them are actually glued. But some of the ones that require, this one requires to clip round the supports, and I wanted to paint them separately. So as a result, you know, this one has been left just clipped. It's just literally clipped in the final model too. Draw 21, could you use women's makeup palettes? Probably. My experience of women's makeup palettes is they're mostly slightly glossy and not that big. The Tamiya weathering powders are basically look like eyeshadow, but yeah, you could do. Not got a clue what they're made up of. Well, it's like eyeshadow, it's just a compressed powder. All these things are just really powders in different forms. You mean you can get cream eyeshadow and stuff, and you know, all sorts of things, but realistically, cheapest bang for your buck is whatever you have. If you've got pigments, use them. I've got some WWS pigments, which I haven't tried at all, but they come in really big tubs. And he was like fed up with the little tubs. So the next time I need a really big tub in a dirt colour, I might well try using those. But I have 5 or 6 dirt coloured grouts as well. Some of them are in brown, taupe, walnut, those sorts of colours. Now, I was going to clip the minis, but in the end I decided that I was going to spray paint them. So I actually took these outside and spray painted. This is Tamiya, but I think that bit of footage has ended up in the terrain section. I need to go through and edit this all down to 15 minutes at some point, which is a joy to come. One of the bits I dislike. Probably one of the reasons I got out of content creation is there's a lot of video editing. Oh, so Tim Williams has come back from Wales from a weekend on the footplate. Were you the big fat controller? You're not fat, but I mean, were you the equivalent of the fat controller? Were you the thin controller, Tim, this weekend? That didn't come out at all right, did it? So I'm doing a bit of sanding here, wet sanding with just normal emery boards, and these are Despy sponging pads. That's a 800, I think, and metal files. I really like metal files. They just create nice sharp edges when you want them. And what I'm really doing is getting where my supports have come off. I know the guys redone them. Now this lot I glued together. The only one that you need to leave apart at all is the seat for Bob. He's easier to get in and out. This is Bob. If the seat isn't actually in, but the clip worked fine. And so I just clipped and unclipped him every time I need to get him out. The sitting model that goes in here. So you can see I didn't do a huge amount of cleanup, and I think it shows in the final models. I could have filled a bit more. I did fill a bit. I used Tamiya. This is just Tamiya basic putty. It's got a solvent in it. It dries. You can file it the next day. But I probably need to do 4 or 5 applications to get it to the right, get rid of that line. So you can actually just see that line on the final model on both FDM and resin. And I'm just like, it's just going to have to be a feature, because I didn't have the time, if I'm honest, to spend all of the time that it needed to get these to look immaculate. And one of the problems is I said I would paint these as I went, but then you think, oh, it's easier just to do them all together, because then you can make it a big conveyor belt of it. And I was originally going to do 8 pod racers, and they were taking so long, I was going to do 6. And then I had a chat with someone, and they suggested, why don't you just do fewer, because people are only ever going to put 2 or 3 to go on the side. I ended up doing 4, which is enough, I think, to do a game, but probably not. You might see here that I'm using, this is actually the original resin one, so if it looks a bit bendy, you'll see that's the resin stand, and you can see it just bends all the time. So then I got the FDM ones out and reprinted them. It didn't take long to do. Tim Williams says he'll just be a controller, probably 12 volt, variable 12 volt. Dillington, I've used some cheap eyeshadow from the pound shop. It worked okay for what I used it for. You just have to be careful, there are no glittery bits in it. Yeah, you can get nudes and stuff like that, but they've always got a really shiny texture, whereas sort of military pigments or Targrout have a matte texture. People don't generally want matte texture on their eyes. They don't really want it to go on matte. So they get some that aren't too shiny, but a lot of them can be quite glittery. Might be good for metallics. If you want to get kind of a metallic edge, I can imagine it works. And you can get metallic eye pencils and things as well. Christoph says, I think 4 racer is a good number for gaming. More than 6 would take too much space on the gaming table. Yeah, for those of you who play Legion, which probably isn't many, they're on a tank base. So I think it's 150mm base, roughly. Thorn Hedge, how's the fume extraction doing, Kathy? I haven't actually got it on at the moment, because apart from this little bit here where I use that thing, I'm mostly doing it with wet sanding. But it's really fun. I put it up and it sucks really well. For those of you who don't know, there's a fume extractor just, let's get the finger right, just at the front of this desk that I'm working on that will pull out. My whole one in the, it's got too many kinks in it. It came down over the winter. The extractor pipe came out the bit at the top. And I need to go through, and it's just, I think it's wrapped back on itself too much at the moment. So the actual back of the airbrush booth in the other room doesn't really seem to pull out very well. So this is a Zenithal Prime. Before I'd put a grey Tamiya primer on so I could see, because this was clear resin, it was hard to see any issues. So I often prime them and then check them. So this is a black Halford spray paint going on, and this is the Zenithal Prime. LS, hello. Kathy, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. I love your videos and dioramas. The best for me is Dagobah's Swamp, a big hug. Oh, thank you. And which way is it when I point? No, that way. That's Dagobah there. I need to find a better home for it, to be honest. But yeah. One of the things, my building work finished over a year ago, maybe even 14 months ago. And I still haven't got rid of all my crates. And I've got a lot of damaged dioramas I still need to fix, like the Mandalorians, the resin on the Mandalorian, asking about warping resin earlier. I put in the big speeder bike on a resin pipe, upright, and it's gone vroom, and fallen over. And then when I touched it, I broke a bit. I mean, it just cracked the super glue. I was like, right, I am not touching this. So I need to get the Mandalorian diorama fixed. It's up high at the moment on a shelf, but I need to take that apart, get that upstairs, and drill out the current stand and put in an acrylic rod or something, and get all that fixed. And my Ahsoka one with the helmets, a lot of the helmets fell over when it got plastic sheeting across it during the building works. So I do need to spend quite a lot of time cleaning all those out and sorting them. Then I've got boxes now where there is no home for them to go to. I need to sort through the final 8 to 10 boxes. I don't know if you see it, there's one just behind me that's got some dioramas in. So I've got some stuff I need to sort, and I've got projects I want to get on with, and yeah, it's just a lot of stuff I want to do. So I need to have some time off from working, because I probably have overworked over the last 4 or 5 years, and yeah, get on. Oh, and that's my mint bed there to the far side of the bins. So I was trying to not spray into my mint bed and get paint all over the mint that I then put in my tea. So there we go. Yeah, you won't get it twice when I do the 15-minute video, but I thought this gave me a chance to talk about modelling. I have to say, having designed these from scratch, one of the biggest challenges for this design was getting the connectors. And each of the connectors, and Christoph's one of my print testers and he's printed these, each of them attaches differently to the races depending on the actual model that I was using as inspiration, because obviously these are inspired by pod racers. They're not pod racers, they are Galactic racers. And yeah, it's actually a bit of a pain. And people kept saying to me, could you not use filament without doing anything? But then there was no way to attach that without creating big holes and things. So and also the filaments are, the connectors aren't straight, most of them, they have like connectors at both ends. So I'm really pleased how they came out. And because I printed them in this really bendy blue, Sorayatec blue, they've bent and not caused any issues at all in resin either, which was a real relief, because I was worried about things shattering in the resin. So I've been really pleased how things have come out, to be honest. The first one took me a few weeks to sort, but they got quicker and quicker as I went on, and Zenithal Prime from above. I should have done it more from the side as well, because actually most of the photos get taken from the side, just as a thought. But anyway, there we go. And this is Army Painter White. A lot of people moan about Army Painter paints, but actually I really like this because it's a nice thick solid white. It does a great prime job, I find, for the minis. You see how much paint is coming out. It puts quite a lot of, but it's quite an opaque white. Finding the right paint is half the problem with spray cans. Still going. And because I have 2 of each of them, I have a resin and an FDM one. What surprised me actually was, once they're painted and done, I had them on different bases. So the resins are all on rocky bases and the sandy ones are all the FDM. And you can see it on the really big one like Sebulba, because you can just see the line lines on it. But I have to say, it's so hard to tell the resin from the other one when they're just on the table in front of you. You really don't notice. It's I think in photos, if you were looking at close-up photos, you would. But when you've just got them sat in front of you and you're just looking at them, you look at the whole, at least I do. You don't pick out the layer lines as much as you would on, say, a big monolithic building which has got a big slab side on it. I certainly, Norm's saying I don't want the Mickey Mouse Mafia after me for copyright issues. I certainly don't. And I feel I'm very close to the wind on the 20% on this in some ways, because, you know, you just need to make them look realistic. So I think I'm a little too close compared to what I wanted to be originally on these. But they need to be 20% different, apparently, someone told me. And they're certainly not identical. If you were to put them next to blueprints, you'd see there are differences. Even the sizing, I just did a lot of the sizing by eye deliberately to make sure that they weren't identical. But they're also very recognisable at the same time. And I think my next Kickstarter is going to be very, very much more from my head, like Saverna was. But I found Saverna didn't do that well. So it's a bit of a dress up between picking something that people want and can recognise or can use on a table in whatever game they're playing, versus, you know, whatever the problem was with Saverna, which didn't do very well at all. So Logiclust has just tuned in from Cali. Is that Cali, Colombia? Because I've been there. So hello. A long time ago, if it is that Cali. That was 93. I went there ages ago. Practically, I think the second place I'd ever been abroad. So yeah. Wow. There we go. So I'm now onto speed paints. You can see there's a lot of white on the top here, and I'm just going over everything. If they're all in one piece, then they're FDM prints and they're on the sandy bases. If they're in multiple pieces, or I take them apart to paint them like here where I'm painting this one separate, then they're the resin ones. And this is a mix of, these are all Army Painter speed paints. And if you don't know what a speed paint is, it is one where the, apart from the metallics I'm using here, where they're slightly translucent, quite saturated I find. The colours are too saturated. And what's underneath shows through, which is why it helps to either dry brush or white over black, or some kind of toning, a light over dark, or to use a zenithal prime. I personally am not a great fan of zenithal primes for painting things because it fixes the light in one direction. For speed, I did it on this, but I come from a scale model background, so I generally don't do it this way. But actually they came out very well very quickly, which is what I was after. What I don't like about speed paints is they have a very translucent effect, and they do look like I'm a thin colour over a white base. And that doesn't look then real. These would have looked far more real if they were actually an opaque colour, probably, over a base coat. And especially if I'd managed to get the gloss and everything else on there that you would expect to see on a sort of candy coat almost. But that would have required a lot more surface finishing than perhaps I wanted to spend the time on. So these are a happy medium for getting partway there. Norm says more likely California. Oh, I don't know. So, Logiclus, I know of Cali, Colombia, but I'm from California, best friend from Cali. Cool. Okay. Yeah, it's, well, I've been to California too, but lot longer ago. I think it was the year after, it was 94. I went to California, and I went back, I don't know, 2017 or something, but literally I was through it in a day or two. We were just doing train stops around places. So these are oranges, and you can see how dark the zenithal is on this. This is one of the problems. But this is just using speed paint. One of the problems I found with the speed paints is I have speed paints 1.0, and they re-energize if they get wet. So trying to go over the white bumps on here, because I wasn't exactly, I thought, I'd just go over the white later with the dry brush, it'll be fine. But it reactivated the orange. So my white kept turning orange because the paint would absorb the pigment from the orange underneath. So it didn't really work that well. And the other thing was, I then later on did the same thing with the sand and sprayed with isopropyl alcohol and water. Now on the races, I was very careful to keep it away from the races so it wasn't a problem. But on the pit stop, I had also painted the pit stop, and you'll see it later, with you know, speed paints. I didn't varnish it or anything, and when I sprayed it with isopropyl alcohol and water to fix my tar grout, everything ran. So I need to decide whether I'm actually going to tweak that. I've done all the photos now, so will I tweak it or not? I might tweak it. I might yet tweak it again. But this is the resin one because it's got a rocky base. I really like that rocky base, but it took me days. I could not get it printable. And what I'd done is I'd actually gone OTT on the number of rocks. And I had like 2,000 rocks on there or something. And some of them were minute and too small. They were like literally microscopic, so you couldn't see them. So I had to almost take out half the rocks, and then it became printable after that. So yeah, always fun. I also don't think speed paints work that well for big flat sections, as I've got here. But you know, having told you all the flaws, you can make your own mind up. They are nice and quick though. One of the important things on all of this is speed when you've got this many models to paint, and they're detailed models. I don't think they're the best minis ever. Poor Bob, when I looked at the photo and I was like, I know I painted your eyes white, but I used quite a dilute white, but I can't even see your eyes. They're just like a black hollow. So Digger's back from coffee. Good to have you back, Digger. Yeah. What time is it? 9:15. Wow. Well, we've still got quite a way to go because we're just doing... that's a FDM print of... This is Mohonic, so Crossonic, as I like to call him. And one of the learning things, and we did this in a live stream a couple of months ago, I actually had to create minis for the first time. I did chat to a couple of creators, but I just don't have the cash coming out of these Kickstarters yet to pay for the price that a mini is, because you're talking £400 or £500 for a mini, you know, generally, and I just don't have that amount of cash being made out of them. So I thought I'm going to have to learn minis, because I think these Kickstarters do better if you have minis included. Not necessarily a huge amount, but you know, people do like to buy minis, and some people will buy the minis and not the races, and some people will buy the races and not the minis, and blah 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 blah. But actually for this I needed seated pilots, and they're so hard because I couldn't just produce one standard bloke. Imagine if I was doing a clone army. I could do one standard bloke, one standard set of armour, spend quite a bit of time getting it right, and then it's just tweaking it. It's just adding on karmas or pauldrons or different helmets or whatever, and you're there. And I could even just do them all helmeted, so there isn't even a face. This, they're aliens, apart from Adika. So I used Make Human, and we did that on a live stream, so I won't go into it that much. I used Make Human, made all my minis, and then spent a lot of time creating the faces, and each mini took me as long as a racer. So doing a racer would be like a week. Doing a mini was also like a week, with a few other things thrown in. But you know, but the terrain, I did almost all the terrain in a week. I mean, it's actually about 6 or 7 days, work days, but it wasn't far off. And yet, you look at it, and I'm just so slow. So my next Kickstarter, which is after this one, will be temples, and I've got to do all the temple guards. And there's going to be a lot more poses of the same types of figures with just changes, tweaks and things. But wow, hopefully it won't take half as long. Yeah, Christoph Norm wants to know if Digger bought enough coffee for everyone. No, he didn't. And I don't drink coffee, so that's fine. Oh, the flags are really big. Yeah, they're actually a bit too big because the things fall off. So I need to make some smaller flags anyway. Because they are too big. So I am going to make some smaller flags, and at the moment they're resin only because at that size they wouldn't print in FDM. But if I make them smaller, I probably can print them upright because it won't be as tall. So I will shrink them down and make some smaller ones with the same 3mm hole sort of pole for them, but you know, make them the actual flag smaller. Norm says, I think you did a great job on the minifix. Thanks, Norm. I actually had to thicken a few things out. So my first pit droids were really spindly and just didn't print well. And Anakin's quite fine. I've tried to attach hands to arms and things where possible so they're not in midair, but I've still got Bob waving and Mahonic waving. At least Mahonic's got chubby arms. Bob's got spindly little things. But the big problems were that stick out the top of Mahonic, they were way too thin. And Bob's got 3 things sticking out the top of him and they were too thin, so I thicked them up a bit. Just because you design, it's one of the problems. You design in a program and it all looks great, it's very fine scale, and sometimes you can spend so much time putting on detail it doesn't actually show. If someone printed them at 2-3 times the scale, it would show, but it doesn't show at the scale you're actually printing at. So Mahonic's tummy would be an example of that. He's got spots on, which actually do show a little, but not a huge amount. But then the pattern that's on the rest of his body just doesn't really show at all. And that was quite hard to do. I could have done with doing it a different method to the way I did it, which was to use a texture that I had, but I probably should have recreated another texture because it didn't really, I didn't think I needed a wider texture. It was quite a thin texture, so it just doesn't print. But as you can see here, I try to do different colours for the FDM and the resin, just for a bit of variety. But I still end up with 2 green Mahonics and 2 red Bobs. They're actually different greens, and that shows on the Mahonic, but on the Bobs they're 2 very different, they're the red ones, they're 2 very different reds, but by the time they've been weathered they look almost identical. It's quite funny. I'm using a Molotow chrome pen, absolutely love it, it's a really great chrome pen, to just add some markings and weathering really on here. I don't think it was ideal, it didn't come out that well, and I think I could have spent more time adding weathering to these and scuffing the edges and everything. But in the end, I decided that what I wanted to do was just tone it all down. So rather than spend a lot of time adding silver scuffs, which I could have done, especially on the front leading edges and things, I decided in the end I was going to put a wash on them and just get on with it. And so there is very light weathering really. The weathering mostly comes in the fact that I've used speed paints that are not even, so there's a lot of mottling. And then I used, this is Starship Filth. It's my favourite yucky coloured oil paint, and I have a big tub of this mixed up. It's Starship Filth oil paint and odourless thinners, because you don't want it to stink. This is where I could do with the vent on actually, because although you can't smell them, I'm sure their particulates are still in the air. And I'm just going over everything with this to create a pattern. Now because I've got a bit of paint on the side, I can put a thicker wash on around the engines and then thin it out a little bit when I'm going over the neater areas. But this is really what toned down the reds to look the same. And I think that the speed paints looked a little too thin in places, so this helped tie everything down a bit. Now you might notice that the bases aren't painted yet. All of the resin and FDM are modular, so even though I've glued some of the resin together, they're the ones that they're still not attached to their stands. So what I was able to do was take them all off their stands, leave them on the side, and take the stands with the bases and the stands in them downstairs. Now what I forgot to do was actually put in the resin uprights, so I had to go and find those and glue them, back in. And when I did the supports, I did them all in Blender off one base support. I hadn't supported the holes properly, so all of my holes filled up, they all closed, and I didn't realise I hadn't got time to reprint them all, which is one reason that pushed me towards professional supporting, that they wouldn't make silly mistakes like that. So what happened was I decided that I would just Dremel them out with that little mini Despy pen, which is what I did. John, I was talking about this in the park. This is a pink fluorescent pigment. I think it's actually for doing your nails, but it's really great for just adding zap. Now it will tone down a bit, no doubt, when I varnish, but I used it to do the reflected light onto the everywhere as well, because it adds a real pink splash around. And I could have airbrushed it, easier just to do it with a bit of pigment. You get that same gradated effect, gradient effect. And then I used black, this is just a grimy black or something like that, black smoke or something, from MIG to do round the engines to darken them down a bit, because if you look, they are quite sooty coming out the backs of them. Polite. Fine thin details of 3D prints are really tricky. I bought HO parts from someone, but the stuff is too fragile. I could have scratch built it myself better. I find this is a great resin for them, this blue. I've taken these outside and painted these magically just by then, using exactly the same method as on the terrain. And I'm just putting it all back together now. These are the FDM ones you see. They're just all literally clipped together in a part. It's so good. Having modular stuff. But I had a bit of a problem. I got my Anakin and Sebulba the wrong way around. So Sebulba was on the ground. I was like, this isn't working. It's like, oh, that's because Anakin's shorter and I put him on there. So, yeah, it worked. Eventually I got them on the right ones. It's funny, isn't it? The others are all quite distinctive. They come out at different angles and different whatever, but somehow Sebulba and Anakin ended up too close. And you can see there that they've literally had the Antico, the Sahara beige, and then the brown wash on top at the moment. So that's where the bases are as we're looking. The resin ones though I had to glue, and I glued them outside because I'd forgotten to do them. Or I glued them before I took them outside and I remembered afterwards, but I glued them without the engines being on because I'd taken everything apart at that point, which was fine, except one of the back bob ones, which is slanted, is just not quite slanted and it's not quite right. And I think it's because in this instance, I'm just gluing connectors on here, but in this instance, because I hadn't supported the holes properly, I dremeled them, and I must have just dremeled it slightly off. I say dremeled, it's just a word, it's a verb, but it's a Despy pen, it's handheld, so it's really useful. It's got a little router bit in it, so it takes out stuff like these resin really well. And I had to glue these. I tried pushing one in, and that was me super gluing it back together after I broke it. So they will click, just like it's a bendy, resin, as I've said, so they will click. I have used FDM mini clips because I have so many. They will click together just like FDM will. But what I find with them is they seem to wear a little bit quicker or differently. And yeah, that outer left top one is too far out. It's bending the connector, so I don't know over time whether that will cause a problem because the connector will stress. But yeah, but the clips worked really well, even in the resin, whereas I've used them before and I felt they were a bit fragile. They would just break all the time, whereas this didn't. It was good. But no, I have super glued these ones because I could have spent hours finding them all to fit and getting them to fit, but I wasn't entirely sure. It was probably down to my supporting, and using this clear resin, I felt that it filled some corners of some of the clip holes more than I wanted. Still, there we go. And that actually fell apart, and I noticed halfway through doing one of the videos that it wasn't attached. So I could do with gluing those ones in actually, because they aren't clunking as well as they should. I think they did clunk a lot better, and I think it's because I've just glued that slightly off angle. But there we go. High-speed rotor tool is the general term. Yeah, that's probably a better term than Dremel. Great models. You're going to be doing more railway related stuff, says GR Railway. I'm not at the moment, and one of the reasons for that is I struggle to work out how I would sell it through something like a Kickstarter method, because I modelled American, but obviously I live in the UK, and I find it's very, very geographically fixed. So at the moment, I can model anything I like in sci-fi, and nobody can tell me it's wrong. If I model a railway, it's got to be identical, it's got to be exact, the rivets have got to be in the right place, and I just find it a much harder thing to model for, to get appeal to people, without doing something that 1,000 people haven't already done. So, to do the volume that I want to do, 3 or 4 Kickstarters a year, I don't think I could make the money off railways. Just a gut feel that, if I did American, I'm in the wrong country. So it's, I don't know. And I did them for 20 years. So I did feel a bit like I've had enough of them. But I enjoy doing this because there's nobody to tell you it's wrong. Oh, you put that rivet in the wrong place. No, I haven't. And, I've had a group of railwaymen come around, look at a diorama I spent 6 months on, and just do nothing but criticise it. Oh, that wouldn't look like that. Oh, that wrench looks wrong. Oh, this looks wrong. And it's just demoralising, and I just found I'd had enough of that. Whereas sci-fi terrain, I haven't really had that at all, ever. I've not really had negative comments about it doesn't look right, ever. So, you know, it's just, I think, an easier place to sell into because there's a more defined market for it through channels like Kickstarter and My Mini Factory. But railways tend to be things like shapeways, and there's already hundreds on there, and I didn't have a feeling of anything I particularly wanted to do. You know, there was just nothing that was calling to me. But Norm is right. He says, I think it's time to design some futuristic looking trains and 3D print them, have them adhere to Kato chassis. So that was an interesting one, Norm. I was actually looking at them, and someone, Multiverse, just did a Kickstarter on a futuristic train. So I've got to leave it a year or two because I can't do them for sale, as someone literally just did a Kickstarter. But what I was thinking of was actually, I was wondering about using a Lego train base. What do people think of a Lego train base? Because that doesn't need powering, it's battery. And Lego has a huge amount of stuff across a huge number of countries. And it's a little bit more expensive, but you know, all the wheels and everything are there with them. So, yeah. And then if you don't want them to be moving, then you don't put them on the Lego chassis, you put them on the 3D printed one. And I've already done 3D printed assembly line, which is basically trailer train, you know, for wagons effectively. So I've done 2 or 3 wagon sort of type things already. But if you look at them for tabletop gaming, they don't move because you can't have your train moving because you want to hide behind it. And if it moves, how can you hide behind it? It's not the way terrain works. So it's an interesting one. I need to work that out. Norm says pretty big though. I am modelling 1:48 all the time for terrain. So yeah, I think what I would have is it would be a gimmick for it to move rather than the main thing for it to move. I would end up producing a series of futuristic looking trains, you know, to go onto a set, but they'd have to be sort of sci-fi, Star Warsy themed for them to look good. And there's a couple, but people have already done them. You know, people have already done the one that's in Book of Boba Fett. Most of people love to hate Book of Boba Fett, and particularly the Vespers. I did think the train was quite cool, but it didn't have track. So Tim says Micron radio controlled chips can be used to add RC to small models, both railway and otherwise. Yeah, I'm quite happy because I designed for FDM, remember, which is quite big and chunky. I'm quite happy for it to be quite big and chunky, which is, you know, easier. Yeah, and Lee's saying there's knockoff Lego, which is a lot cheaper. That's what I was thinking, you know. It's easy, and it's all on the same standard, and you can 3D print the track. So I think the track that I did for my Severna Spaceport assembly lines, which had wheels and stuff on them, flanged wheels, I think that track is Lego sized, but I need to buy, when I'm going to get to it, I'll buy a Lego train. There's a couple of train sets that have fairly sci-fi looking. I think one's a city passenger train, and there's another one that have fairly good sci-fi ones, but they're about £100, so I'm not spending that money until I'm ready to get there. Hi, Kits Creek. It is, yeah, Kits Creek Hobbies from Canada. Hello. But yeah, if you were to Google Lego trains and go look on Amazon, I think the city passenger set, one of them looks fairly, and then there's a cheap knockoff one that's also about £100. So I could do with finding them a little bit cheaper, really. You know, at that price, it's not something you want to say it's just Lego standard, and you could put this onto a Lego base, which means I'd then have to do an attachment to a Lego base somehow for people. But yeah, I think it'd be cool. This is me painting minis, some of them with really bad zenithal primes. I didn't paint all the minis in the end. So I've got 4 that I've designed: Attica, Corsonic, Bob Jetster, and Bully Bullhorn. And Attica and Bully both have with and without helmets. Mohonic and Bob just are as they are. And I have a standing pose, or 2 standing poses if there's with the same pose if it's helmet and hair, or helmet and no helmet. And then I have a sitting pose With Mohonic, I have 2 sitting poses, one waving, one not. And so Bob actually has the fewest poses because he's just holding on. But yeah, it's fun doing little minis this way, but they weren't very long. You know, I literally just did speed paints on them. Which is good, actually. It makes you realise how quickly I could get stuff on table if I wanted to, except for the fact I'm modelling clones that definitely don't really work. Just all the little bits, they don't work that well in speed paints. You have to paint all the black undercoats. But Mohonic is really cute. You can see, you can't really see the texture on his arms and body, but he was cute. I liked Mohonic. He was my favourite mini that I did, actually. He's like a giant bull. But Jason Jensen keeps teasing us about his futuristic trains with 3.75-inch figure space-related diorams. He does, and I really love his spaceport. And I don't know if he was inspired by it. There's another one that I saw before he started his, which his name is escaping me. Who's done an entire sort of spaceport in that sort of scale. And it's really cool. He does great photos from it. And you know, I love that sort of thing. And I was originally going to do one. But, you know, now I design this stuff. If it's not being designed for this, it's not happening, effectively. I did a spaceport. So, you know, if I wanted to, I haven't got the space to put it all out. You know, it's amazing how much space doing this, which is 1:48. So it's 3.75 inches is almost twice the size, because it's about 1.5 inches, the scale of these. So it's a very different type of scale. But yeah, my favourite scales are either really big, like a 1/6, so you can actually see the people, or I like 1:48, which is O scale if you're doing trains, because again, you can see what you're doing. You know, Bob here is quite a big chunky guy. And when it came to scaling these minis, I designed the sled and racers based on the scales in the Star Wars vehicles book, which I own, and then I basically did the figures, and then apart from the 9-year-old boy, which is a 9-year-old boy from Make Human, I actually scaled the aliens just to fit into the racers, so they all fit with their arms where I want them to be, and the racers were basically like that. Whereas the 9-year-old boy, this one, Attica, which somebody didn't actually spot, but _Ica is Mandalorian for little child. So that's where his name came from, if anyone's remotely wondered. I hate doing names. Mohonic became Corsonic, Sebulba became Bully Bullhorn, Ben Quadrineros became Bob Jetster, but Attica is Anakin. I feel it's close enough people can guess what it is, and somebody actually did recognise it as a little one from Mandalorian, so there we go. I really should have spent more time doing Sebulba stripes, but I was kind of getting a bit like, I just want these finished now. So I used a really thick brush, look at the size of that brush, and just went and did his stripes a bit more representative than perhaps are actually there. Yeah, it's funny. I am not a miniature painter, but you know, this is what I would call tabletop standard rather than diorama standard. But that's what they're being used for, really, tabletop. And if you don't know what the difference is, tabletop is I've got to paint the army to get it on the table and I just want to play with it. Lee Lavery, is there a Mandalorian dictionary? If you Google Mandalorian dictionary, you'll find there's various spreadsheets and lists online. Some of it came from the Karen Travis books, which I would never recommend because I think they've got a bad taste to them. But I really do like the Mandalorians. I'm reading, as I said, a lot of fan fiction, and I really like the Mandalorian fan fiction, so I'm picking a lot up from that. Norm says my patience is really amazing. I don't think my patience is what it used to be, and I think it's because I'm always on a deadline. Whereas before, I was on a deadline for if people were visiting, I wanted something done on my railway or diorama or whatever. So I would basically be working to deadlines. Whereas now it's my job to do this. I've actually modelled far less since it's my job, and I don't feel I have the patience on something like this because I've left it to the end. And I could put my diorama back a week. But if I do that, then, sorry, my diorama, I could put my Kickstarter back a week. It just, everything goes back, and then it starts running into July too much. As it is, I normally only do 3.5 weeks, but I'm doing a full 4 because of July 4th weekend that's in the middle of it. And I know how impossible it is to do Thanksgiving, selling around Thanksgiving. Everyone says don't do Kickstarters that end near Thanksgiving because nobody will buy them. So I wasn't sure how July 4th would impact if I finished, on July 4th, which is when I was due to finish, with July 3rd. So what I've done this time is try and finish the week after. But I don't know if people get bored of their family and spend a lot of July 4th buying stuff, or whether, they're busy doing other things. So we'll have to see. Lee Lavery says, I'm moderately interested in language creation, so that's really interesting. What I think I like about a Mandalorian is they do conjugate a lot of words together. But what I really like is the fact there's no gender on it. So you literally just have to learn Buir is parent. What I don't like is it's all written. So I have no idea if I'm pronouncing it right. But then I remind myself that you can hear a din coming from a diner. So just because somebody says it's pronounced a certain way doesn't mean it actually is, because let's face it, none of us actually know what the pronunciation is of an alien language. This is the pit stop, and again it's speed painted, which did come back to bite me when I put the tar grout on. Up till then they looked great, and then they bled. So I do need to decide what I'm going to do. But so far they've been treated the same as everything else. The Antico, the Sahara beige, and then covered again with a brown wash, which has pooled quite drastically on the one that I'm not painting at the moment, the other one. So I've got the resin and the FDM there. You can't really see a difference from here. You can when you're painting things like the hoses. The hoses are all ridged, or not all ridged. A lot of the hoses are ridged, and you can really see those ridges in resin, and you can't see it in the FDM really. It just doesn't come out. But yeah. So Norm says, July 4th is not really a purchasing holiday outside of fireworks and barbecue food and drinks. Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was a bit like I'm stuck with my relatives and I'm bored sort of holiday. I've only been to America once for July 4th, and we were travelling and everything was shut down. Like nothing was open. We went, the national parks were open, and we went to Lowell that day, but all the shops were shut, which made me think maybe people go online. What is the yellow palette says stating the obvious? But thanks, Norm. It's a popper. It's like a fidget popper. But because it's like a silicone, you can just pop all the paint out from the other side. It comes off more easily. So I tend to turn it round, pop everything out, and most of the paint will pop out of it, the solid sort of crud at the bottom. Less so with these that are quite flexible paints, but it's easy to clean anyway. Oh, hi Monique. Monique's arrived from Brisbane. Nice to have you in the house. You've got about 20 minutes left, and this has got, it's interesting, I don't know how long this has got. Let's have a look. Oh, I daren't touch it. It might restart it. But yeah. It's funny, I actually do have a modular set of these as well if people want to run them together. It would look very identical, but I wanted this as a comparison of FDM and resin, and I was really impressed with 0.1, apart from on the wall, as I think I said. But yeah, they're very brown and whites and beiges, and it was all looking a bit too saturated. I think this is the problem with these speed paints. Everything just does look a bit too bright, which is why I then went and put tar grout over everything to try and tone it back down again. But yeah, I put speed paints on the back wall as well, and where I sprayed the front, it created a watermark on the back, which is fine because you don't see it in the photos, but I see it in real life. So I do need to spend a bit more time going over these things, I think, with maybe building up a bit more pigment around the hoses to hide the speed paint bleed. But I'll probably varnish it first and then go back and fix it, otherwise I'm just going to get the bleed again. So for now I just put a bit extra tar grout on, but if I varnish it, hopefully that will fix it. I don't know whether the varnish would have run I guess it depended whether it was an acrylic or a lacquer varnish, and I have both. But this is a speed paint. Again, it's a 1.0. And when I sprayed from the front with isopropyl alcohol, the back got a watermark on it because I didn't spray the back particularly, I guess, by comparison. So the tar grout I think is really important. It makes it look dusty, and that was the overall theme that I got when I was looking at it in the pictures. And this is what the pit stop area looks like in the movie, more or less. Obviously I've made up stuff, but it's a pile of sandy scenery and junk effectively with the wall. And I really think tar grout works well, but I really recommend that you seal before you do the tar grout, before you do that with it. And now, because hey, this video is the gift that keeps on giving. Remember, it's the third video you've had. This is me filming it, so this is just me pushing loads and loads of stuff through, which is quite funny. But if you look, everything is up on really useful boxes just for the height of the camera, because I'm pushing this on a dolly, which is 4 wheels. It's like a roller skate for cameras, manual one. And so I'm just pushing them back and forth. And this is all I did, was I just pushed everything back and forth for ages with the green scene. So we don't have to watch much more of this, but I just wanted to show you, I mean, I can leave it going in the background. I just wanted to show you what this looked like because it was quite funny to do. All you need is to get this to work on a video editing program is one that will do green screen keying, and that background then disappears. The problem is when you have Mahonic, who is also green, Mahonic disappears. So actually I shot this with Mahonic, partly because they all fit through the arch, but when the arch is up on the bricks, they were slightly different heights, and it wasn't really, I was clunking the side. It has to be quite a big arch because of the size of Sebulba and Bob, effectively. Monique, how did the final video come out? It's right at the start, but I can pause this now and go and play it again.
Welcome to
Galactic. So this is the
final
video.
And we have a great race for you today.
All our
the
races
contestants are
getting
making
ready.
their way to the start line. What are you waiting for?
Really
Bully Bullhorn,
and then we've
that's
got
Attica, the rank outsider.
Here we go.
Course Sonic in pole position, or perhaps
They're the flag
Bob
wavers. They are big
Jester
flags.
yet to finish a race. The flag wavers are clearing the track, and
Race is
they're
ready
off.
to go. And that's how
We
it
have
looks.
an early lead from Bully Bullhorn,
Then.
but the others are fast
On
behind.
the high side,
Oh,
I mean, this is
Attica's
passing
catching
in
him
front
up.
and behind.
Will this
So
pit
one
stop by
thing.
Bob Jester losing the race? No! Attica crosses the finish line first and the crowd go wild.
There we go. That was how it came. Oh no. Right, let's just get back to me. So that was what the race looked like. And I've used bits of it in the pitch video, but the race is going to go in the pitch video now. And there's sound and announcements, which I just talked through with everything. And it's quite hard because the sound doesn't sound like it, but I don't want to get too close. But it is cool. And Attica always wins, obviously, you know, because he has to. I did read a really good fan fiction where they lose and they all get stranded on Tatooine for ages and start living their own lives, and they never really get off Tatooine, and that's it for the rest of their lives, which I thought was quite amusing. But yeah, there we go. So that is going live sometime this week, pinned at the top. In other things that are going on, well, really my life seems to be Kickstarter or just reading at the moment. I don't really get to do much else. Oh yeah, Christoph says, I like the homage to Rogue One in that video with the logo and the story. Yeah, it's actually one of the titles that I had, and I saw it and I thought, oh, that'll be really cool. That'll be a really cool one. So Tim asked, will there be a Wacky Races version? I'm old enough to loved Wacky Races when I was younger, but no, definitely not. Daft Dastardly, Muttley the Hound, or whatever it was. No, there won't be, I'm afraid. Penelope Pitstop will not be making a feature, but there is a pit stop if you want it. What I have got is a load of stretch goals still to design. The rocky bases are actually one of the early stretch goals, and then I've got to sort of partition them out differently with some social stretch goals in there. So that's a job for tomorrow, to work out what my social stretch goals are going to be, which will be like share this Facebook post or share this Instagram and you get this. share the picture video and you'll get this, or like it or whatever. So yeah, I need to do a bit of work on those, and they're mostly mini, so there's going to be some little Jawa pit crew or Jawas that can go around, because they're quite simple to do, I hope, with cloaks, and apparently they're furry underneath, according to Pelly from Mando and Book of Boba Fett. So, you know, I might have to do a little rat or something underneath somehow. But yeah, we'll see. Nigel says, did you like the Dune movies? Will there be any Dune-inspired models in the future? So, I didn't like the original Dune movie. I read the books when I was a kid. I thought the first movie was very slow. They spent a lot of time lovingly packing the house and looking at that bull a lot. And I didn't get around to going to the cinema to see the second one. And I think it might now be out on TV, but I'll wait till it comes to Sky Cinema for free. And I'll probably watch it then and watch the first one as well. Everyone said the second one was better. I guess the answer is I'm not a huge Dune fan. It's not that I don't like the aesthetic. I quite like the aesthetic. But I'm not a huge Dune fan. If I was going to pick another area, I really like Mass Effect, Starfield, Titanfall 2, games, Halo. I really like all of those as games, and they affect me far more heavily than actually movies do, apart from Star Wars. And I do Star Wars because it sells well, and because I like the universe, I like the design. Star Trek doesn't appeal because, again, it's a very different style. I do like the Western in space effect of Star Wars, though I think Tatooine's overdone, so I probably won't come back to Tatooine for quite a long time. But I wouldn't mind doing, I think for the rest of the year I've got temples, and then at Christmas I did Maul Scimitar just for fun, and it's 90% done. It's not split for printing, but it's like perfect screen accuracy, so I can't actually sell it because it's not inspired by it, it's exactly like. So what I'll probably, and it's not playable, it's just a giant ship. So what I'll probably do is actually make a playable version, because it's got a ball on the back, and Maul is supposed to live in this ball, and I've seen the plans. All of the plans treat it like a cylinder. Oh, he's got all this in the bottom. And you're like, he can't have all that in the bottom, because actually the livable space isn't that big in the bottom half of a sphere. And people's RPG plans for it were ridiculous, because they were the same size for both of it, and there's only 2 stories, and the middle story has the floor with the no sides. It just wasn't right. And his actual spaceship is very long, but it's all crawl space, and to get into the front of it, it has to be landed and ramped down. But I quite like the shape of it, so I might redo that for a quick, sneaky December one, but don't put a lot of time into it, because I've already put a lot of time into it, and have like the one you can just print and play to go on your desktop, tabletop, and then one which could be a playable interior if you want that as a style of game instead. So there we go. So where are we? Utini indeed. Tom Bankston, that galactic race, how long is one lap in light years? Ooh, 0.000000001, I think. Norm, I like the desert terrain pieces, like the arch and the mountains. Any plans for any add-ons? Yeah, there'll be more. I've got the ramp, you know, where he goes up the ramp and he bursts through the door. I've got that planned. There'll be some more sand dunes and stuff like that going on there. So there will be more desert terrain going on. Norm, the second one was way better, very much worth watching. That's what everyone said, but I just didn't get around to it. Monsville, Titanfall mechs are very cool but highly detailed. They are. I really like the whole art. I have all the art books for Titanfall 2. I really like the design aesthetic. It's my favourite game company, Respawn. They did the Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order, and I like the design aesthetic there. I like the game mechanics. So Titanfall 2 is almost my first call. But actually Mass Effect Andromeda had some great like habitats for living in outposts, and you build your own outposts quite a bit there. So I might go back to Mass Effect Andromeda for some inspiration. People didn't like the game, but I loved it. So I might go back to some of that when I do a habitat kind of outpost, which is on the plans as well. So Tim Williams, if you like Western in Space, then Firefly's worth seeing. Oh yeah, I watched it when it came out, and Serenity. I love it. It's great. I really do like it. I just don't remember it being world building in the same way. So Lee said, how many hours have you played Starfield? I did all the achievements are out, like every single achievement, all 50 of them, including getting to level 100. And I think I was on elapsed time of 11 days, 10 hours or something, having played it. And I played that almost all in the first couple of months, and then I haven't played it since. I noticed they've done a big update, but until they bring out the next DLC, I probably won't go back to it. Lee says, I perfectly bought an Xbox Series X to play it. I did that for Jedi Survivor. I bought Jedi Survivor and then discovered it wouldn't play on my Xbox One. And I was like, Mum, I'm 50. Could you buy me an Xbox, whichever the one that has the DVD, so I can play the old games on, please? So she bought me one for my 50th because I couldn't afford it. So I bought one just for playing Jedi Survivor, because I really do love that game. I really like Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order. I'm going to play them again. So when it comes to temples, I think one of my temples will be quite Jeddah inspired. So it will be deserty, but a different type of desert to Tatooine. It's hard to explain if you haven't played it. It's more, and definitely there's some temples in Survivor sort of things as well, but they tend to be High Republic type things. So there'll definitely be some Jedi temples coming out. It's going to be 2 temples. It's going to be a Jedi temple and a Sith temple, I thought. But actually, I wonder whether I get more mileage out of a desert temple and an ice temple. So we'll have to see. So let me know, do you think I'll be better with a good and a bad one? Or do you think I'll be better with a desert temple and an ice temple? Because the ice temple is definitely very Ilum or Ilum. I think it's Ilum, isn't it? And Jeddah is very well known from Rogue One, as well as featuring quite a lot in sort of Legends and Jedi Survivor, which would be a good excuse to play it again. And I've got Outlaws on order for the summer. It comes out August, I think. Norm says, lol, that's funny. I can't remember what I said that was funny, but I'm glad you found it funny. It's, I don't know. I'm still thinking desert versus ice versus Jedi versus Sith. But it's definitely going to be one good temple and one bad temple, I think, when it comes to the altars. Because I want one to... I mean, they're all going to have ancient Jedi, which is the same as Urkitat, which is the Sith language, because I'm far too sad to know all this because I've been Googling it. But I think there will be sort of... One will get painted in the interior parts, not the exterior parts, because it's going to have both. One will get painted in red and black, and one will get painted in blue and gold, and that's how you tell them apart. But once you're inside, the outside is largely irrelevant. And there's quite a lot of temples in the Jedi games. Jedi Fallen Order has a lot of temples in it as well. So Monsville and Monique says, Rogue One was a great movie setting the scene for original Star Wars movie. I loved Rogue One. It's one of my favourite movies. I am not a fan of Andor, which was the programme they made coming out of it, mostly because it's just so slow. It's just so slow. I felt like it got 12 episodes and almost every other Star Wars series gets 8, and I felt like it could have had the 8 and I'd have been happy. Norm with the, Mum, can you buy me an Xbox? That's what he's laughing at. Yeah, I did say to her for Christmas, Mum, can you buy me a lightsaber for Christmas? And she just looked at me and went, why do you want a lightsaber? I'm like, because I want one. She's like, I will buy you something more practical. I was like, okay. That's why I had to buy myself one after Christmas on the sale. Yay. I got a Star Wars rug instead of her. It's a very subtle rug. My friend came round and she looked at it and went, oh, I don't get how this is Star Wars. And I'm like, oh, it's got baby Grogu, baby Yoda's face in it. And she goes, now I see it, but I couldn't see that till you said. So it's a very subtle Star Wars rug. It's very cute. Whereas my one upstairs in my workroom is not at all subtle. It's like Millennium Falcon and Rebellion ships. So it's far less subtle. But I can't believe, 57. We are nearly at the end. So this goes live this week. So, you know, if you're interested, please pop on over, follow the link, sign up beforehand. I'd love to actually make enough money to do this for a living. I'm getting there. I need to build up a bit, but it would be great if I actually could pay a few more bills this year. It'd be perfect. But I actually did make a profit last year on my company, so that's good. So here we go. And Monique says, you're lucky to get presents for either, Kathy. That's very true. And I was very, very lucky. Oh, Monique, she says, I'm 55 this year and get no gifts. Well, we used to give ourselves a lot more gifts and we've tried to pare back in current years. But I think because I'm not earning a lot of money, my mum and dad still like to give me good presents. So there we go. The advantage of changing career in your late 40s is you have no money and you're used to having a lot of money. It suddenly becomes, I just can't buy the lightsaber because I can't afford it. That's such a weird experience. There we go. Anyway, Norm saying, fun show, Kathy. See you in 5 weeks. Take care. Bye, chat. I haven't said, and I always say it first, and I'm so sorry, I haven't said thank you to my moderators. Thank you to Digger, Timber and Norm, who come along every time and moderate and keep you all in order. So thank you to them. Tom saying, thank you for an enjoyable stream. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Monique. Yeah, I'm with you, says Monique on the changing career later. And Dillington, good night, Kathy. Say hi to your grandson. And thanks everybody for taking part and listening. And thank you for all those who watch on catch up. I will see you all in 5 weeks' time when I think my Kickstarter may still have a few days to run. So I will update you then on how it's going and nag you all to buy it. So get in there now and then I won't need to nag you. Take care, guys. And thanks, Timber, Digger and Norm. Thank you very much. And see you all next time.